Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
Some men get midlife crises and buy red sports cars. Others get Marta's oatmeal and a cold shoulder every morning for breakfast. I'm Tom Halstead, 45 years old, and I've been getting the cold shoulder special for about 6 months now. Tom, I'm going on a girls' retreat this weekend, Marta announced over her organic steel-cut oats, not bothering to look up from her phone. Her manicured fingers tapped against the screen with the urgency of someone defusing a bomb. Don't expect to reach me until I'm back. I paused mid-sip of my coffee. In 23 years of marriage, Marta had never been the girls' retreat type. She was more the work until midnight and complain about everyone type. But there she sat, perfectly put together at 7 in the morning, her auburn hair styled like she was heading to a board meeting instead of some spa weekend. "Where's this retreat?" I asked, trying to sound casual while my finance manager brain automatically calculated the cost of whatever luxury experience she was planning. "Mills Lake area. Victoria organized it." She finally looked up, her green eyes cold as January in Chicago. "It's a wellness thing. You wouldn't understand." Victoria, my sister-in-law, the self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer with her fake smile and designer everything. If Victoria was involved, this retreat probably cost more than my monthly salary. Victoria had been filling Marta's head with ideas about living her best life and not settling for mediocrity for months now. "How much is this wellness thing costing us?" I asked. Marta's jaw tightened. "It's my money, Tom. I earn enough to afford a weekend away from." She gestured vaguely around our kitchen, the same kitchen we'd renovated 3 years ago when things were still good between us. "Away from what? Your family? Your home? Away from this routine, this boring, predictable life where nothing ever changes." She stood up, smoothing down her pencil skirt. "Some of us want more than just existing, Tom." I watched her grab her designer purse and head toward the garage. 23 years of marriage, 2 kids in college, a mortgage we'd nearly paid off, and apparently it was all just existing to her. After she left, I sat in the kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator and thinking about how we'd gotten here. Marta worked at Pinnacle Creative, a boutique advertising agency downtown. She'd started as an account coordinator and worked her way up to senior account director. I was proud of her success, even when it meant later nights and weekend emergencies. But lately, those emergencies seemed to happen more often. Late-night texts she'd hide from me, phone calls she'd take in the other room, emergency work meetings that required her to dress like she was going to a nightclub instead of a conference room. My neighbor Danny knocked on the back door around 9, holding 2 cups of coffee from the gas station. Danny worked construction and had the kind of straightforward honesty that cut through suburban bullshit like a chainsaw through cardboard. "Saw Marta leave with a suitcase," he said, settling into the chair she'd vacated. "Girls' trip? Girls' retreat," I corrected. "Wellness and spa treatments, apparently." Danny snorted. "My ex-wife went on one of those right before she asked for a divorce. Called it finding herself. Turned out she found herself in bed with her yoga instructor." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Marta's not having an affair, Danny. She's just going through something. If you say so, buddy." Danny sipped his coffee and studied my face. "But maybe keep your eyes open, you know? Sometimes we see what we want to see instead of what's actually there." After Danny left, I found myself wandering through our house like a stranger. In Marta's home office, I noticed things I'd been ignoring. A new perfume on her desk that I'd never smelled on her. Receipts scattered around for restaurants I'd never been to. A business card for a personal trainer named Jared Cole. Jared Cole. I'd heard that name before. Marta had mentioned him as the new creative director at her agency. Young, ambitious, drove a silver Audi that he parked in the visitor spaces like he owned the building. I'd met him briefly at the company Christmas party. He had the kind of practiced charm that made my skin crawl, all white teeth and firm handshakes, and eyes that lingered too long on married women. I picked up the business card. On the back, someone had written, "Thanks for the motivation," in Marta's handwriting. My phone buzzed with a text from Marta. "Made it safely. Going offline for the weekend. Don't call." Don't call. In 23 years, she'd never told me not to call her. I spent Friday evening cleaning the house and trying not to think about what Marta might be doing at her wellness retreat. But by Saturday morning, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened the Find My Phone app on my iPad, something we'd set up years ago for safety when the kids were younger. Marta's phone showed up as a small green dot on the map. But it wasn't at any spa or retreat center. It was at a private residence on Mills Lake, about 2 hours north of the city, the kind of place where rich people went to pretend they were roughing it while drinking wine that cost more than most people's car payments. I stared at that green dot for a long time. Maybe it was a private retreat center. Maybe Victoria had rented a house for the weekend. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation. Or maybe I was the world's dumbest husband. By Saturday evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw some clothes in a bag, told Danny the first was going for a drive to clear my head, and headed north toward Mills Lake. The address from the Find My Phone app led me to a gated community called Lakeshore Estates, where the houses started at $2 million and went up from there. I parked on a public road about a quarter-mile from the gates and walked through the woods that bordered the property. The October air was crisp, and leaves crunched under my feet as I made my way toward the lake. I felt ridiculous creeping through the trees in my khakis and polo shirt, like some middle-aged suburban spy. This is how Dateline episodes start, I thought. Tom Halstead was found dead in the woods, apparently after discovering his wife's affair. But I kept walking. The house was a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, perched on the lakeshore, like a spaceship that had crash-landed in paradise. Every window blazed with warm light, and I could hear music and laughter drifting across the water. I crept closer, using the landscaping for cover, until I found a spot behind a cluster of pine trees, where I could see into the main living area. What I saw made my stomach drop like a stone. Marta was there, all right. But this wasn't any girls' retreat I'd ever heard of. She was dancing in the living room, wearing a silk robe that barely covered her thighs, a glass of champagne in her hand. Victoria was there too, along with Chloe Martinez, Marta's friend from yoga class. But they weren't alone. Jared Cole lounged on the leather sofa in nothing but swim trunks, his gym-sculpted body on full display. Another man I didn't recognize sat beside him, equally underdressed. The women were taking turns, sitting on their laps, feeding them grapes, and laughing at jokes I couldn't hear through the glass. I pulled out my phone and started recording. My hands shook as I watched my wife of 23 years grind against another man while her sister cheered her on. So much for the girls' retreat. So much for wellness and spa treatments. Marta leaned down and kissed Jared, long and deep, while Victoria took pictures with her phone. Chloe was making out with the other guy on the opposite end of the couch. It was like watching a porn movie starring people I knew and trusted. I was so focused on the scene inside that I didn't notice the security guard until his flashlight beam swept across the trees near my hiding spot. "Hey, who's out there?" I dropped to the ground behind a fallen log, my heart hammering against my ribs. The guard's footsteps crunched through the leaves, getting closer. I held my breath and pressed myself against the cold earth, praying he wouldn't see me. "Probably just a deer," another voice said. "Come on, let's finish the perimeter check." I waited until their voices faded before I dared to move. My phone was still recording when I finally stopped the video. 12 minutes of footage that would destroy my marriage. But at least now I knew the truth. I made my way back through the woods, branches catching on my clothes and scratching my face. By the time I reached my car, I was bleeding from a dozen small cuts, and my khakis were torn at the knee. I looked like I'd been mauled by a very small, very polite bear. The drive home gave me 2 hours to think, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision. Marta wanted to play games? Fine. I'd show her the rules. But first, I noticed something that made me smile for the first time in months. Jared's silver Audi was parked in my driveway. The arrogant bastard had driven separately and left his precious car at my house, probably thinking it would be safer than leaving it at some random hotel. I walked around the Audi, admiring its perfect paint job and pristine interior. Jared had always been obsessive about that car, washing it every weekend and parking it away from other vehicles to avoid door dings. That's when I remembered seeing his keys in a decorative flower pot by the front door of the lake house. He'd been so eager to get inside and start his weekend of adultery that he'd left them right there in the open. I looked at my house, dark and empty, then back at the Audi gleaming under the streetlight. Some men get midlife crises and buy sports cars. Others get revenge. I drove back to Mills Lake that night with a trunk full of supplies from my garage. Zip ties, spray paint, and a bag of frozen shrimp I'd grabbed from the freezer. If Jared wanted to play homewrecker, he was going to learn there were consequences. Ugh. The lake house was quieter now. Most of the lights dimmed. I could see figures moving around inside, but the party seemed to have moved to more private locations. Perfect. Jared's keys were exactly where I'd seen them, sitting in the flower pot, like an invitation. I pocketed them and got to work. First, I removed all 4 tires from the Audi, using my tire iron. It took me 45 minutes of sweating and swearing, but I managed to get them off and hidden in the woods. Then I popped the hood and stuffed the bag of frozen shrimp into the air conditioning vents. In a few days, when they thawed and started to rot, the smell would be unbearable. For the finishing touch, I spray painted homewrecker across the hood in bright red letters. My handwriting wasn't artistic, but it got the message across. I was admiring my work when I heard voices from the house. The front door opened, spilling light across the driveway. I dove behind a nearby SUV, just as Jared and the other man stepped outside, both of them laughing and stumbling slightly. They were drunk and happy, probably coming out for a smoke or some fresh air. Did you see the look on that yoga instructor's face when Victoria? Jared started to say, then stopped. What the hell? I peeked around the SUV and watched him stare at his vandalized car. His face went through several interesting color changes before settling on purple with rage. Who the fuck did this? He screamed, loud enough to wake the dead. My car! My fucking car! The other man was laughing now, which only made Jared angrier. Dude, someone really doesn't like you. Think it was a jealous husband? Jared spun around, his eyes wild. It had to be that loser Tom, Marta's pathetic husband. He must have followed us here. Lights came on in the house. I heard Marta's voice calling out, asking what was wrong. This was my cue to leave. I slipped back into the woods and made my way to my car, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I hadn't felt this alive in months. Good thing I skipped leg day for a decade, I thought as I jogged through the trees. All that sitting at a desk had prepared me for a life of stealth and revenge. By the time I got home Sunday morning, I had a plan. I uploaded the video from Saturday night to my computer and created several anonymous social media accounts. At Lake House Lies seemed like an appropriate username. Then I spent an hour researching Jared's wife, Victoria's ex-husband, and Marta's boss at Pinnacle Creative. Social media made it so easy to find people these days. Marta came home Sunday evening with a fake tan and a guilty smile. She looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. The sight of her glowing face made my chest tight with rage. How was the retreat? I asked, not looking up from my laptop. Oh, it was wonderful, very rejuvenating. We did yoga and meditation, got massages. Victoria found this amazing place. She was lying smoothly, like she'd been practicing the story all weekend. That's great, honey. I'm glad you had fun with the girls. She kissed the top of my head, and I could smell cologne on her skin. Not her usual perfume, but something masculine and expensive. Jared's cologne. I'm going to take a shower, she said. I feel like I have lake water in my hair. After she went upstairs, I opened my laptop and started uploading the video to the anonymous accounts I'd created. I tagged Victoria's ex-husband, who she'd divorced 2 years ago, but who still followed her on Instagram. I tagged Jared's wife, a sweet-looking woman named Sarah, who posted pictures of their golden retriever and their anniversary dinners. I tagged Jake Morrison, Marta's boss at Pinnacle Creative, who prided himself on running a family-oriented company. The posts went live at exactly 9 p.m., just as Marta was getting out of the shower. My phone started buzzing within minutes. Text messages, missed calls, notifications from social media platforms I didn't even know Marta used. I turned the phone to silent and went to bed, leaving Marta to discover her new reality on her own. I woke up to the sound of screaming. Marta stood in the bedroom doorway holding her phone, her face white with shock and rage. Her hair was still wet from the shower, and she wore the terry cloth robe I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. You bastard, she whispered. You sick, twisted bastard. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I sat up in bed and stretched like I'd had the most peaceful night's sleep of my life. How's your phone working this morning? Getting a lot of messages? You followed me. You spied on me like some kind of stalker. I tracked your phone, actually. Amazing technology. I can see exactly where you've been and when. I smiled at her. Mills Lake is beautiful this time of year, isn't it? She stared at me for a long moment. and I could see her calculating how much trouble she was in. The video had been viewed over 1,000 times already, shared and reshared across multiple platforms. Her perfect reputation was crumbling in real time. Tom, we need to talk about this rationally. Rationally? I got out of bed and walked toward her. She actually took a step back. You want to talk rationally about your weekend of fucking another man while telling me it was a girls' retreat? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I have 12 minutes of video that says otherwise. The doorbell rang downstairs, sharp and insistent. Then it rang again, and again. Expecting company? I asked. Marta's face went even whiter. Oh God, what did you do? I walked to the bedroom window and looked down at the driveway. Jared's silver Audi sat on blocks, the red spray paint stark against the morning sunlight. And standing next to it, pounding on my front door, was Jared himself. Nothing in Raub, he looked like he'd slept in his clothes. His perfect hair was disheveled, and even from the second floor I could see the rage radiating off him like heat waves. Looks like your boyfriend wants to have a chat, I said. Should I invite him in for coffee? The doorbell turned into continuous pounding. Jared was shouting now, loud enough for the neighbors to hear.
She left this in your apron. You didn't even throw it away. You forgot a woman's lipstick in your—
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Tom, get out here, you coward. We need to settle this like men. I looked at Marta, who was staring at her phone screen with the expression of someone watching their entire life explode. Well, I said, this should be interesting. I grabbed my baseball bat from the closet and headed downstairs. Time to meet my wife's lover face to face. I opened the front door to find Jared Cole looking like a man who'd discovered his perfect life wasn't so perfect anymore. His usually pristine appearance was wrinkled and disheveled, his eyes bloodshot with rage and probably alcohol. Behind him, I could see Mrs. Bell from across the street peeking through her curtains, and Danny standing in his driveway with a coffee mug, clearly enjoying the show. You son of a bitch, Jared snarled, stepping toward me. You destroyed my car. I leaned against the door frame, the baseball bat resting casually on my shoulder. Did I? That's a serious accusation, Jared. You have any proof? I know it was you. Who else would? Could have been anyone. Married women have husbands, you know. Some of them don't appreciate homewreckers. I smiled at him. How's your wife taking the news about your weekend activities? His face went purple. Sarah doesn't understand the situation. Oh, I bet she understands perfectly. 12 minutes of high-definition video tends to clear things up pretty quickly. I stepped out onto the porch, still holding the bat. You lost your car? That's too bad. I lost my marriage. Let's see who's angrier. Jared raised his fist like he was going to take a swing at me, but then he noticed the bat and thought better of it. He also noticed Danny walking across the street, and Mrs. Bell opening her front door to get a better view. This isn't over, he said, backing down the steps. You're right about that. I followed him down to his ruined Audi. See, the thing is, Jared, I'm just getting started. That video, that was just the appetizer. I reached out and slapped him across the face, hard enough to snap his head to the side. The sound echoed across the quiet suburban street like a gunshot. That's for fucking my wife, I said calmly. The rest is still coming. Jared stared at me in shock, his hand pressed to his reddening cheek. He looked around at the neighbors watching from their yards and windows, realized he was outnumbered and outgunned, and stumbled away toward the street where a taxi was waiting. Nice show, Danny called out as Jared's taxi disappeared around the corner. You want some coffee? Thanks, but I've got work to do. I went back inside to find Marta sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. Her social media accounts were exploding with comments, shares, and messages. Her carefully curated image as a successful professional woman was being shredded in real time. My boss wants to see me first thing Monday morning, she said, without looking up. Victoria's ex-husband is threatening to sue her for defamation. Jared's wife posted his naked pictures on Facebook before she blocked him. Sounds like a rough morning. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. Maybe you should have thought about consequences before you decided to have your little lake house orgy. It wasn't an orgy. It was just, we were drinking, and things got out of hand. Things got out of hand for an entire weekend, multiple times, with cameras rolling? She finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Genuine fear. Tom, please, we can work through this. It was a mistake, a stupid, drunken mistake. No, Marta. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. A mistake is double booking dinner reservations. What you did was make a choice, multiple choices, over multiple months, to destroy our marriage. I stood up and walked to the counter where I'd left a manila envelope. Inside were copies of bank statements, credit card receipts, and printed emails I'd found on our shared computer. I'd spent Sunday morning doing research while she was confessing her sins to her lake house friends. Did you know Jared's been married for 8 years? I asked, spreading the papers across the table. His wife Sarah seems nice. Posted a lot of pictures of their anniversary dinners and weekend trips. Funny thing though, those weekend trips line up perfectly with your emergency work meetings. Marta stared at the evidence of her affair laid out in black and white. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even a receipt for lingerie from a boutique downtown that she'd never worn for me. And Victoria, I continued. Turns out she's been planning this little intervention for months. Found some interesting text messages between you two about helping you find yourself and showing you what you're missing. Your sister's been actively sabotaging our marriage, Marta. How does that feel? You had no right to go through my private. I had every right. We're married. We're married. Past tense. I gathered up the papers and put them back in the envelope. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I've already moved half our money into a separate account. My half. All completely legal. I've also retained a lawyer who specializes in adultery cases. The color drained from her face. Tom, please don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. The only thing I'm interested in fixing is the mess you've made of our life. But don't worry. I'm not going to just quietly disappear and let you play the victim. I walked to the front door and grabbed my jacket. I'm moving out today. Danny's letting me use his guest room until I find an apartment. But before I go, I want you to know something. I turned back to look at her sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect life. You and Jared and Victoria thought you were so clever, sneaking around behind my back. You thought I was just some boring, predictable husband who would never figure it out. You were wrong. Where are you going? To rent a food truck, I said. I thought I'd send some lunch to your office tomorrow. Shrimp cocktail seems appropriate, don't you think? I left her sitting there and walked out of the house I'd called home for 15 years. But I wasn't running away. I was just getting started. Monday morning, I parked across the street from Pinnacle Creative and watched through binoculars as a bright yellow food truck pulled up in front of the building. Shrimp Happens was painted on the side in cheerful red letters, along with a cartoon shrimp wearing a chef's hat. I'd paid the owner $500 to park there during lunch hour and give away free shrimp cocktails, courtesy of Marta Halstead and her lover Jared Cole. The driver, a college kid named Marcus, had thought it was the funniest revenge plot he'd ever heard of. By noon, a crowd had gathered around the truck. Marta's coworkers were taking pictures and posting them online with captions like, "When workplace drama gets real," and "Free lunch with a side of scandal." I could see Marta's face in her office window on the 3rd floor, pale and horrified as she watched her professional reputation get served up with cocktail sauce. Jared was nowhere to be seen. According to my research, he'd called in sick Monday morning and hadn't been back to work since. His wife Sarah had filed for divorce and taken out a restraining order after he'd shown up at her sister's house drunk and belligerent Sunday night. But my real masterpiece was still to come. Tuesday evening, I was sitting in Danny's living room, planning my next move, when my phone rang. It was Amelia, my 20-year-old daughter, calling from college. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom called me crying about some video and said you were trying to destroy her life." I'd been dreading this call. Amelia and her brother Ross were the only innocent victims in this whole mess, and I'd worked hard to keep them out of it. "Your mother had an affair, sweetheart. I found out about it, and now we're getting divorced. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." She said you posted private videos of her online and vandalized some guy's car. I documented her adultery and made sure the people who needed to know about it found out. As for the car, I paused. Let's just say actions have consequences. There was a long silence. Then Amelia said, "Dad, I'm coming home this weekend. This is insane." "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. Ross is driving down from Madison. We'll be there Friday." After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone and wondering if I'd gone too far. But then I remembered the video of Marta grinding on Jared while Victoria cheered her on, and my resolve hardened. They'd started this war. I was just finishing it. Wednesday night, everything came to a head. I was staying at Danny's house, going through divorce paperwork, when I heard glass breaking next door. Through the window, I could see someone moving around inside my house with a flashlight. Call the police, I told Danny, then grabbed my baseball bat and headed for the back door. Tom, don't be stupid. It's my house, I said, and I'm tired of people thinking they can walk all over me. I'd been expecting this. Jared was desperate and humiliated, his marriage destroyed and his job in jeopardy. Men like him didn't handle failure well. I'd prepared for the possibility that he might try something stupid. I slipped through my back door and moved quietly through the dark house. I could hear Jared upstairs in the master bedroom, throwing things around and cursing. He was drunk. I could smell the alcohol from the hallway. Looking for something specific? I called out, flipping on the lights. Jared spun around, holding a crowbar he'd used to break into the house. His face was flushed with alcohol and rage. His clothes rumpled, like he'd been sleeping in them for days. You destroyed my life, he slurred. My wife left me. My job is gone. Everything's ruined because of you. Everything's ruined because you couldn't keep your hands off my wife. I kept the bat ready but didn't raise it. Not yet. You did this to yourself, Jared. She was going to leave you anyway. She told me she was done with your boring, pathetic life. I just gave her what she needed. What she needed was a better husband. What she got was a midlife crisis and a lawsuit. I smiled at him. How's that working out for everyone? He raised the crowbar and took a step toward me, but his coordination was shot. I'd set up a few surprises for exactly this scenario. Tripwires connected to paint cans balanced on the stair railing, motion-activated cameras I'd installed over the weekend. You want to settle this like men? I asked. Fine, but we're doing it my way. I backed toward the stairs, leading him into the trap I'd prepared. The motion sensors triggered as he followed me, and suddenly the house was flooded with light. The security cameras I'd installed started recording automatically, streaming live to my phone and uploading to the cloud. Jared lunged at me with the crowbar just as his foot hit the tripwire. The paint cans came down like a slapstick comedy routine, covering him in bright yellow house paint from head to toe. He slipped and fell, sliding down the hardwood stairs on his ass, while I recorded every second. By the time he reached the bottom, sirens were wailing outside. Danny had called the police, and half the neighborhood had gathered on my front lawn to watch the show. The live stream from my security cameras was broadcasting to my social media accounts, where hundreds of people were watching Jared's final humiliation in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to the cameras as the police burst through my front door. I present Jared Cole, creative director and homewrecker, covered in paint and dignity. The police found Jared sitting in a puddle of yellow paint, crying like a child. They arrested him for breaking and entering, while the neighbors cheered and took pictures. The whole thing was over in 10 minutes. But I wasn't done yet. As the police were putting Jared in their car, another car pulled up to the curb. Marta got out, followed by Victoria and Chloe. They'd come to try to talk me out of pressing charges, to negotiate some kind of peace treaty. And they were too late for that. Tom, Marta called out as she walked up my driveway. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. The crowd of neighbors turned to watch this final confrontation. Mrs. Bell had brought popcorn. Danny was recording everything on his phone. Even the police officers stopped to listen. Have I made my point, Marta? Because I'm not sure everyone understands what happened here. I walked to the middle of my front yard, where everyone could see and hear me clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced in my best public speaking voice, let me tell you a story about trust and betrayal, about a woman who threw away 23 years of marriage for a weekend at Mills Lake, about a sister who actively sabotaged her own family for Instagram likes and entertainment. I pointed at Victoria, who was trying to hide behind Marta. Victoria Brennan, lifestyle influencer and destroyer of marriages. She planned the whole thing. Rented the house, invited the men, encouraged her own sister to cheat. All so she could feel better about her own failed relationships. Victoria's face went white. That's not true. I have the text messages, Victoria. All of them. Including the ones where you called me Marta's boring husband and said she deserved better. Including the ones where you promised to show her what she's missing. I turned to Chloe, who was trying to edge away from the crowd. And Chloe Martinez, yoga instructor and enabler. You knew Marta was married, but you helped her lie to me anyway. You took pictures of her with another man and posted them on social media like it was all a big joke. Finally, I looked at Marta, standing in the wreckage of her perfect life. And my dear wife Marta, who traded 23 years of marriage, 2 children, and a home for a few nights with a man who's now sitting in jail covered in paint. The crowd was dead silent. Even the police officers were listening. You all thought I was just some boring, predictable husband who would quietly accept being betrayed. You thought you could humiliate me and I'd just disappear. You were wrong. I gestured toward Jared's paint-covered form in the back of the police car. You lost everything for a weekend at Mills Lake. Your marriages, your jobs, your reputations, your self-respect. Hope the Prosecco was worth it. Marta started to say something, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. See, the beautiful thing about revenge is that it doesn't have to be violent or illegal. It just has to be public and permanent. Every time someone Googles your names, they're going to find videos of your lake house party. Every job interview, every date, every social event. This is going to follow you forever. I looked around at the crowd of neighbors, all of them recording this moment on their phones. And the best part, I didn't have to lie about anything. I just had to make sure the truth got the attention it deserved. Marta collapsed onto the driveway, finally understanding that her perfect life was never coming back. Victoria was crying, her influencer image destroyed beyond repair. Chloe had already gotten back in her car and driven away. The police finished loading Jared into their cruiser and drove off. The neighbors gradually dispersed, chattering excitedly about the best entertainment Maple Street had seen in years. Danny clapped me on the shoulder and headed home. I stood alone in my driveway, looking at the house I'd shared with Marta for 15 years. Tomorrow I'd start looking for an apartment. Next week I'd finalize the divorce papers. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Marta was still sitting on the pavement, staring at her phone as the social media notifications poured in. The live stream of Jared's break-in had been viewed over 10,000 times. The video of my speech was already going viral. Next time, I said, walking past her toward Danny's house. Think twice before planning a girls' retreat. Or maybe just pick better friends. Either way, I'll be here, enjoying my shrimp cocktail. I left her sitting there in the wreckage of her choices and walked away from 23 years of marriage without looking back. Some men get midlife crises and buy sports cars. Others get revenge served ice cold with a side of justice. I got both.